You've talked a lot about teachers, too, and about the relationship that teachers should have with all of these changes. Are teachers feeling inspired by what they hear out of Washington right now?
I think it's mixed. I think there's been a tremendous embrace of the higher standards, the Common Core, from teachers from the unions, which is, I think, a very, very courageous move. Some of the things that we've encouraged through Race to the Top of better teacher evaluations and taking into account student achievement, some people like that, some people don't. It's very scary, and moving away from focus on a test score and looking at growth and gain. I think it's a big step in the right direction, but has that been universally beloved? No. But as you know, we've talked a whole lot about this next generation of teachers, 1 million teachers retiring, a third of the workforce, and our ability to attract and retain talent over the next 4, 5, 6 years is literally going to shape public education for the next 30. So we've launched what we call this Respect Project. There's lots of information on our website. I won't go into all the details, but we think the entire teacher pipeline is fundamentally broken. Who we attract, the pool coming in, how we train them, how we mentor them, how we compensate them, how we build career ladders, how we support great talent, how we move out those that aren't working. The entire thing is basically broken. And so we're looking to have radical change going forward. Again, can be a little scary, but we think it may be the biggest gift we can give to the country.
Is there a role for Washington to, I mean, one of the points that was raised today in some of the conversations is question about whether data technology feels punitive to teachers, feels like we're punishing them, feels like somehow, they're the ones who've got to make all the changes. Is there a role for changing the conversation, changing the narrative, and is that something that you're trying to do?
Well, again, these things are always really complex. So would there be some teachers who feel that? Absolutely. But I can't tell you how many teachers I've talked to who thinks this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to them, and how they desperately wish they had more access to technology and to real-time data when they were younger in their careers, early in their careers, or even when they were in schools of education. So I think every great teacher doesn't just want to teach. The goal is to have your children learn. Right. And actually knowing whether your children are learning, not in June, but every single day of the week, every month of the school year, is an amazingly empowering, liberating sense for teachers. And for them to be able to differentiate instruction, figure out what students are succeeding, how to talk to them, how to use the after-school time, how to work with parents. I think ultimately this is going to be a huge win. Teachers have felt very unsupported historically. I think data, real-time evaluations can professionalize this in a very different way and give teachers a much greater sense of their own efficacy.
And I would agree to that and add one thing. I've had the same experience as Arne talking to teachers around the country. Yeah, some are threatened by technology. They don't understand it. But the more dominant theme that I've seen is teachers more and more sensing that technology can be a force multiplier for them, that it can allow them to do things with their kids that they can't do now. I've seen situations where teachers saw for the first time demos of what personalized learning can be and how empowering it can be not only for the student and for their parents, but for the teacher, and how technology can reduce time that teachers spend on administrative tasks, for example, that don't really translate into helping educate a kid, to letting technology take care of a lot of that stuff, and making it easier for teachers to focus on where they can add value and what they want to do. We do a disservice to teachers when we overgeneralize about where they are on these. So I just find more and more excitement. I think the other point I'd make is, Arne and I are both getting old, and I think 4 years in either of these jobs, makes you kind of old. But I've seen tremendous change in the last 4 years. I've
From
seen
what you hear from teachers.
Yeah, and I see it. I would say, I have the FCC is a really, interesting place because we're an agency with sort of a horizontal remit, right? We're focused on communications technology, and communications technology is, highly relevant and getting more so to everything, to our economy, to healthcare, to public safety, to energy and education. But one of the things that I've seen across all the different verticals is a similar pattern. In the last 4 years, people going from not understanding the internet and high-speed internet and what does broadband mean and what is software and all the rest, to getting more and more comfortable with what it is and how it can help. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sorry, I don't want to talk too long, but I want to make one other point. This is, I think, a common pattern where, where commerce leads and other sectors follow. And so the more that people adopt iPhones and iPads or Android phones and everything, and they see, wow, this really can help me do a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm reading more. It's easier to make reservations at restaurant. I'm traveling better, whatever. When you then go to those people and say, well, think about now. Imagine it in the education world. Imagine it as a teacher. Imagine it as a parent, and they get it.
So the imagine part is really important, right? Because one of the things that we talked about at the meeting today is that not all schools have broadband. Not all schools have enough internet access to actually get even an entire class online, and that schools are being charged different rates for their broadband access. So that kind of has led to a couple of questions. I mean, we have this project which is launching today to say, let's test and see who actually has broadband. I think the question for the government side is, number one, is there a role for the government, or should there be a role for the government in trying to moderate this question of is a school paying $10 or is it paying $40 for their internet bandwidth per megabyte? Is that a government role or is that a private sector role?
Well, it's a government program, and we have responsibility to make sure it's run as efficiently as it possibly can be, and that it's at least serving, if not over-serving, its goals. There's something that's become clear to me as we've worked with Jim and the LEAD Commission, and by the way, let me just pause for a minute. Thank you to Jim Coulter and Jim Steyer and all of you and TPG and McKinsey for doing this. No one's getting paid for anything here. All these people have full-time jobs, and to see people like Jim from the private sector, Jim Steyer, from the nonprofit area, Lee Bollinger from Columbia, Margaret Spellings, who could be doing a lot of other things, say, hey, you know what? We're going to come together and help identify and solve problems.
So is it the private sector's duty to monitor this question of what schools are paying, or the government?
No, I think, listen, first of all, what's the fundamental goal? When we think about E-rate and we think about these issues, the most important thing that I think we have to grasp and act on is we can't let bandwidth be a constraint to harnessing the benefits of technology for education. And E-rate is an incredibly valuable tool in making that happen. Now, E-rate is going to be the most effective if schools are getting the most bang for their buck in what they pay. And it's absolutely a part of what we need to do to make sure that happens. It's part of what we've already tried to do in eliminating rules that didn't make sense that prevented schools from lighting up dark fiber. If there are, yes, it's something that we have to get right.
Okay. Arne, one of the things that we're seeing is lots of different models for education, right? We're seeing everything from the sort of massive online courses through personalized learning. How are these things really changing your idea of even the relevance of tests? We've heard so much about PISA tests and we're falling behind and so forth, but when we're in these worlds where people can reach out and grab education from wherever it is, how does that change our thinking on tests?
So first of all, we met today with Udacity and Coursera and Sal Khan, so it's a fascinating day, and I think they are literally helping change the world and lead us where we need to go. But I think those international benchmarks and even the benchmarks across states are still extraordinarily important. And obviously, everyone here knows we're competing for jobs, not in our states or our districts or in our country. We're competing with India and Singapore and South Korea and China. And I absolutely want to know how our children are doing relative to other places. So if people can learn from across the globe, learn 24/7, that's fantastic. But I still want to know, are our graduation rates going up, are our dropout rates going down, and are our children competitive? And
Is
today
there-
they're not.
Is there a role for talking about mastery in education, though? And how do we does that become a part of the dialogue?
So competency versus seat time, is that? Yeah, absolutely. And so moving away from seat time, moving towards competency, you're seeing that on the higher ed side, you're seeing that with some of our waivers to states around No Child Left Behind. But that's still, to be clear, that's still an evaluation at the back end of do you have mastery or not.
Do you think we test too much?
I think in some places we do. And again, for me,
What would be an example of that?
I think where folks have had local tests, state tests, multiple different tests, sometimes in conflict with each other, that doesn't make sense. But I think for me, I draw a big distinction between testing and evaluation and high stakes and low stakes. And yes, I want to look at growth and gain year over year and see how much students are improving. Rich, poor, black, white, gifted, special ed, average, doesn't matter. I think that's really important. But I think having low stakes, no stakes assessments, whether it's every week or every month, or now it's getting to be every day, to really understand, did that child learn what you taught them today in 5th grade English or 8th grade algebra, whatever it might be, so that teacher can teach differently, so those parents can interact differently, so the after-school program can do something differently, and most important, so the student himself can be empowered to take ownership of their own learning. I think that's hugely important.